What is up? I am Miguel Antonio, and this is the Live and Create podcast. It's where I interview artists and entrepreneurs about what it means to live a great life and create great things. On today's episode, we have the artist Nicolas Caesar. He's been featured on Late Night with Conan O'Brien. He was the curator of art for Scream 4, and his works of art have been sold all over the world. We stumble upon advice for new artists. We talk a lot about merging business and the art world and what that should look like. And we dive into the topic of how an artist should truly never stop their whoring ways. There's a whole lot of great information in here. We also talk about the value community, and I hope you guys enjoy it.
The Live and Create podcast.
Well, and I know we got originally connected through Caleb. You were illustrating his book, and excuse me.
No problem.
And so through that, we got connected by email. I've gotten to see a little bit more of what you're about, what you're doing. Sounds like you kind of have a wide breadth of experience in the art world. When I was looking up on some of the things you've done, there's lots of things I hope to dive into in the little bit of time we have. But
we could always make a part 2.
That's true.
Electric
it's like
Boogaloo.
leave them in suspense when
there you go.
We're coming back. But you had talked about being part of Scream 4 and you're an art curator for Scream 4. And I was just from my own personal curiosity, what is an art curator in the movies? Like, what does that look like?
Basically, like a long time ago, my buddy Skip, he was looking for artists, and he went to one of the galleries that shows my art, Hyena Gallery in Burbank. And so he is auditioning arts. The first movie was a film called Clock Tower, and it's based off of the video game and starring Mila Jovovich. And basically, he had hired me to he hired several artists to be sort of like have an audition to make all these sort of like crazy drawings. It's like this big journal, kind of like a Necronomicon, and this woman's nightmare with the clock keeper, this guy with these giant scissors that goes around. And I was the only artist who could keep up with the director, change his mind every 5 minutes. So that made an impression, and unfortunately the movie was shelved, but then when Scream 4 came along, Skips was like, hey, I know you work really fast, and we have a week to what we want to do is we want to create like a whole bunch of Scream fan art in the barn scene, and we have a week to do it. And so basically I got on the horn, I hired all my friends, and that's kind of like what the art curator is like you curate all the different artists for the movie. And we had about a week to do it. We finished it a week, mailed it all there. Then Wes Craven was like, oh, hey, I like these. I'm going to keep them all in the office. And Skip's like, no, they're for the movie. They're not yours. And he's like, but I want them. And he's like, no, they're like, all these people worked really hard to get, and stuff. He's like, oh, okay. So then once you're on the set, Skip kept moving them around. And became kind of like a Where's Waldo, because he's like, I'm going to make sure none of these are cut out, and with all the different angles. So then I'm watching the movie, and then Courtney Cox walks underneath it, and it's the closest I ever got to a friend. And so that was like my big break. And the whole movie, I'm like, and it's one of these like mixed bags. So Scream 4 is not that great, but I'm working with Wes Craven, which is like a childhood dream of mine.
That's
I made a real
fantastic
horror movie. And it was super awesome. And then after we got all the art back, then we had a show. We showed all the art at Hyena Gallery. And then I still see.
Where's the Hyena Gallery at?
Hyena Gallery is in Burbank, California.
Okay, gotcha.
And what's really funny now is every once in a while, I see the piece that I sold to them for about $200. And then I see it resurfacing in all these prop catalogs for like $750, $1,000, $2,000. And this is the kicker. I forgot to sign it.
Ah, damn.
So I had to send this like, we were in such a rush to do everything. And like, I'm trying to get everything boxed and done and paint dry, everything, get it all to the thing. I was like, oh, I forgot to sign it. Maybe I need to like send a little piece of paper that they could tape on the back with my signature on it or something like that. But I think it's just like you're saying, it's like no matter how prepared you are for something, something always happen out of left field. So
I think that's a cool lesson for really any artist too, because you were part of this film that you put so much work into and it gets shelved. And a lot of people think, well, that's just over. But what it did is it opened up yet another amazing door for you, which was even bigger than the first opportunity. I think that's a really cool thing to see. I had a friend who's an actress out in New York, and she auditioned and really worked her ass off for this one part. And then it got pushed aside. But then like 2 weeks later, it gets a call for a much bigger role for something else. So it's really cool to hear, like, as an artist, you made the best of the opportunity because you were able to work so quick, but then boom, you get this bigger opportunity within it. That's really cool.
Totally. And the first movie that got shelved, I remember going Skip, and I was like, oh man, it got shelved. He's like, well, did you get paid? I'm like, yeah. They was like, shut up.
That's true.
Like,
I used to. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, he's like a prop master from like a million movies, from Fight Club to all these different things and stuff like that. He's like, you don't even want to know how many of my films like I worked on their shelf and everything. It's like, if you got paid, that's success. If you didn't get paid,
Yeah, I had a bass player when we would tour. Every once in a while, we'd find ourselves in these really strange places, like backwoods of West Virginia, doing some random gig on the way to the other main gig. And I was bitching about it, like in the van at like 2 a.m. And he just looks at me. I got quiet. And he goes, "So is the check going to clear?" I was like, "Yeah." He goes, "Then maybe you should shut up."
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, yeah, I should accept it.
That was like, I mean, that was like I remember when I first started doing art professionally and everything, I had no idea what I was doing, because it's like I took art classes, right? And it was basically like you're at summer camp making like bead, like, macaroni art, wallets.
Yeah, the fence with the popsicle sticks.
Yeah,
right?
I felt like I was just there kind of like, like twiddling my thumbs, and no one ever taught you about the business side of art. And right. It's as important as your art, because it's like, I know, and you probably know, like a million different artists who are like, or creative people who don't sort of show outside their house or the room or whatever. They just sit on their talent. And a lot of that's because they didn't know. And like when I first started out, I grabbed a magazine like Juxtapose. I went through all the artists. I was like, how do you make it as an artist? And they're like, the ones that did respond to me, they're like, I don't know, I'm still foot pedaling it. These are like guys in Juxtapose too. And I was like, I thought you guys like, had it made and all this stuff, or rolling in money like Basquiat and Andy Warhol and everything. They're like, nope, got 2 jobs.
So, they're like, nope, still working my ass off. But I see that in bands a lot. There's a lot of bands that are up and coming artists that I really respect and admire. And the more I've like seen what they're up to behind the scenes, like some of them they'll go on like a 6-month tour, before COVID, and they come back and they're, a waitress at a local place just to try to make ends meet. It's like, it's the art world it's a rewarding world, but it sounds like very well. It can be a very painful, slow world as well.
Yeah, it's like, it was a really fun, because like I had like a million jobs, from like I was a tour guide at the Winchester Mystery House. I was selling knives door to door. Like I was at Morgan Stanley Dean Witter as a account pirate. I was doing Tiger Woods taxes. I was doing all these different things. And the one thing that's like, I remember like when I was temping, it's like everyone I was temping with is like a Telephone Jim Jesus. He's like this rapper from Anticon. They're all like writing novels and everything like that. And you sort of like, you have this sort of camaraderie where like none of us want a desk job, Exactly. And it's like, but you like, I mean, when I was first starting out, it's like, it's like before I could really figure like put a plan together to the business side of art, like right. I was just like, I don't know, I was doing like clubs, I was doing like whatever, I was doing like coffee shops, I didn't know whatnot. And then it really kicked off in 2006, where I was on MySpace, that's how old I am, and I got this message from this guy Chip in Sacramento, and he's like, hey, I have this gym, and we do this thing called Second Saturday Art Walk. Do you want to do it? I was like, okay, I'm going to meet this guy I've never met in a gym. He says he'll have my art, whatever. And I took the dare. And then from there, it was really interesting because this is like sort of the beginning of the lowbrow movement. And like I did the art walk. I walked around and I saw all these galleries and it was like landscape, 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 bowl of fruit, landscape, landscape, landscape. And when I was doing my show with my weird art, I had two kinds of people come in. One side was like, oh, this isn't art. This is not landscapes. Like, I don't get it.
Where's the bowl of fruit?
Yeah, exactly. And the other side was like, oh, thank God this isn't a freaking landscape. Like, it's something different, you know. But from there, this is kind of like when I made the transition, because I returned to California from Ohio. Long story. Came back with like a handful of CDs. Like, I was like poor. I was living on a hooker mattress in a house that looked like the Fight Club house in Oakland. And and I had no money and stuff like that. So like fear, desperation, and poverty were like my teachers of like, okay, like if I'm going to be an artist, and this is around like all the jobs is like the recession, all the jobs are like all gone and everything like that. So like I was just like stuck in this weird kind of quagmire. And then at the Second Saturday Art Walk, it was really weird because I was so different and my stuff stood out. I would make rent money every month, and it's like, but then it's also, you have to hustle, because it's like every Second Saturday Art Walk is 4 hours, so you have 4 hours to sell all your art and make money for ramen, chocolate syrup, toilet paper. So that's where it's just like, you know, it's like all those past sales jobs kind of like came together. But
that's awesome.
Different than sales, it was like I actually cared about what I was doing. You know, where it's like, I was like, here's my art.
Like, I'm selling this thing. Before,
yeah, exactly.
Now you're like, finally get to apply this to something I'm passionate about, that I give a shit about.
No, I mean, it was like, I realized like so many office skills, like Excel, Word, everything comes back into like play when you're making it like as an artist, when you're doing art full time.
Right.
And so because I had no money and I was broke, I just basically spent what I had on more canvases. And then it started from like, I went from Tribe to Sideshow Studios to Cool Cat Gallery. So there was a time when I was averaging about 5 shows a month. And so I was just super productive because, again, fear, poverty, desperation.
I'm hungry.
Are great teachers. Yeah. So, and then fast forward, and then like from that, like that expanded to all these galleries around the world. And, you know, I just turned into the girl who couldn't say no, you know, and even if it was like like, I remember this one gallery, like, I had spent something like $75 in the mail and got everything back. And so I was like, oh, like, and I had paid $75 to get everything back. So I was like, I lost $150 there. But Wes Craven bought me a new TV, you know? So it's like, you know, it's like, give or take. But I think the actual practice of it, because the other thing that I wanted to change is I wanted to change, like, the whole gallery system. Because galleries, like a lot of high-end galleries, and like they alienate collectors from owning original works of art. So I did the math, and basically like all the people who are like, you know, just regular people are far more mass number than someone who's going to like buy art and use it for like a tax shelter or throw it in a vault or anything like that. So I was like, well, how about I cater to them, make art accessible to everybody, keep like super low prices, like where everyone could afford it. And that's what kind of kept me afloat. It's kind of like I adopted the philosophy of the dollar store. And I really like the guy at the dollar store. They interviewed him and they're like, how do you have all these chains with, you know, everything $1? And he was like, well, see, you go in there and you're like, oh, everything's $1. And then you just pile more things in your cart. By the time you're done, it's like $40, $50, $70. You're out, you know,
Right.
but you also have that thing where it's like, it's very disarming because it's just $1. And like, that's like my art.
Right.
You know,
That's
it's
awesome,
very,
man. I love that strategy behind it. Like, how do you open up? We have a First Fridays here in Kansas City. It's called Crossroads. It's our arts district, and they noticed there was a lot of people coming from the suburbs who weren't like the typical like art enthusiasts, and they started doing a trolley where they had a guide that would take them to each place and essentially educating people on the art. And I think it's a similar perspective of like, how do we help like your everyday person engage with art, and what does that look like, and help them understand what they're paying for, you know, and why these mediums are so valuable and those kind of things. And I love it, man. I love it.
Because that's another thing too, is like when you take sort of like average people and you're showing them original art, there is that sort of education involved in it. Because like you get the flea market people, right? They're like, I don't know if I want to pay $100 for that. I mean, I could, you know, my kid could probably pay that. And I'm like, well, have your kid put his stuff out here, you know, have him come next week. You know, I'm like, what are you doing? Like, your kid could be making money or whatever kind of thing. But, you know, the whole thing where it's like you sort of educate them like what art is. It's like, hey, I'm selling myself. I create. This is like years of like my life kind of like outpouring into like everything from like crazy little cartoon characters, from like nightmare scenes to like whatever kind of thing. You know, and it's, you're creating something from nothing, you know, and what I'm doing, and you just sort of like educate, because like having low prices too, you get the stigma is like, oh, it's not worth that much, versus the like philosophy behind it. And you're like, no, this is like, and people have told me this, where it's like having your own Leonardo da Vinci. It's like having your own personal, like, you know, because of like all the commissions that I do, everything's like, again, I'm the girl that doesn't say no. So it's like, you know, and they're like, wow, this is like a real painting. I'm like, yeah, it is a real painting, and you can afford it, and you can afford more. And how I stay afloat is because it's like when your cost is low and your volume is high, you stay afloat and you can sustain yourself as an artist. You know,
it sounds like you've been developing that ability throughout your whole career. Like, even as you started out saying, like they hired you for Scream 4 because they knew you were fast, and for some reason they only had one more week. Like, it sounds like you throughout your career have already prepared yourself to create a very like a huge volume, but great work at the same time, which is a powerful thing to be able to do as an artist.
It was kind of like one of those things, like, it was like after Morgan Stanley laid me off, and it was like I had the severance package and everything, and I had made some money off of Krispy Kreme stock, because if there's a recession, people are depressed, they eat donuts, and so
I put sugar in my mouth.
But I was just like, I had that kind of thing. I was just like, you know, it was like I was in my 30s, and I was just like, you know, my life is getting close to, you know, like one day at a time. And I was like, what am I doing with my life? You know, it's like, I always made art. I always like, and I had no other option. So I was like, I'm going to do this even if it kills me. And then I did it thinking it was like the hardest thing in the world. Well, approaching galleries was the hardest thing in the world. I had all these like stigmas of people are like, you can't do that. You can't do that. And then it was like, it was really funny. I was like, I've done over like 3,000 or 300 shows, 3,000 pieces sold. And It wasn't until like I did Scream 4 when people are like, oh, you really are an artist. You know, it's
like, what the hell, man?
No matter what your success is, it doesn't freaking matter. You know, it's like, it's like you had the celebrities in there, like Charlie Sheen bought my art, and they're like, oh, he really is an artist. And
it all comes full circle because you talked about Courtney Cox walking in front of your painting, which is the closest you've ever been to Friends. And last night I watched the episode on Friends when Charlie Sheen was there, and he got chicken pox with Phoebe Buffay. Like, I feel so connected now in this conversation.
Oh, the era of like when your biggest worry was chicken pox. I miss that.
Right. Well, and it's cool that that perspective too. It's like you're working your ass off, but then you get this big thing and people are like, oh, you are an artist. You're like, bro, look at what's been happening all the way behind. Are you familiar with Gary Vaynerchuk at all? Gary Vee?
No.
He's a big business dude, and I love what he does. But every step of the way, he gets bigger and bigger opportunities. And people are like, is this the moment for you? He's like, no, it's just the next step. Because the reality is I've been working my ass off for, 20 years and people don't see it. They just started celebrating now. And that's true. I think even entrepreneurship and artistry.
But no, I mean, it is one of those weird things because it's like I gave a lecture at Clyde Gallery and told artists, like up and coming artists, I was like, okay, like remember the end of Pretty Woman when Richard Gere comes in the limousine with the bouquet of flowers? And I'm like, there's no Richard Gere, there's no art gallery that's going to save you from your whoring ways. You're always going to be whoring your stuff out there. Because it's like, yeah, but I mean, it's like, no matter what success I have, whether it's Charlie Sheen or whether it's like Scream 4, I'm doing another movie right now called, I don't know if I could swear, but Bat S.
Oh, yeah.
And
Bad shit. Yeah, you can swear all you want.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Bat Shit. It's this really crazy movie that's coming out. My friend Amir and Todd are putting together. It's super crazy. And yeah, it's like the thing is, it's like you have success and it's like, oh, that's great. I could breathe for a little bit. But then once it's gone, then it's like you start up again, you're foot pedaling all over again. And it's like, I think the biggest myth or misconception about art is that somehow you'll be able to retire.
And I think there's another part of it too, where do we really want to retire in a sense of like with the idea of creating? Like obviously, we all want no stress of the money and that kind of piece. But I think when it comes to, and I think of artists as the ultimate entrepreneurial endeavor because it is business, but it also is creation. And I think about the idea of retiring, and it actually doesn't even sound fun. Like I just want to create in a new way, and I hope it's a little less stressful because the money saved up can kind of feed us, and we're okay, and we can just keep creating new things.
Yeah, no, I wish in like some sort of Star Trek utopian society, it's like all artists had to do was just create art and not think about money at all. But
that'd be brilliant.
We got bills too, and a lot of it also additional to that is trying to validate art as an actual job. Like when I first when I was dating my wife and her grandmother is like, what does he do for a living? She's like, he's an artist. And she's like, yeah, but what does he do for a living? And she's like, he sells art. And she's like, yeah, but what does he do? Fast forward, Charlie Sheen. Oh, he's an artist.
You're like, I sell shit to Charlie Sheen. That's what I do.
But
I laughed so hard because my wife got that so much. Like when I was on tour with my last band, they're like, so what's your husband do? He's in a band. And they're like, oh. She's like, it was always like this conversations killer. So she's like, I'd always be like, yeah. And they're on tour right now. They're like up in New York City and they're going to do, like trying to like let them know, like, no, he's not like fucking around for drinks on the weekend. He's really building something,
Yeah. But I mean that gets to the other part, especially being a band, because like there's also like the sort of scam side of taking advantage of artists and musicians, where it's like, you could play here but sell tickets to your own show. Like Raw Artist was a lot like that, where it's like, all right, well, you're going to pay $300 for all these tickets, but you'll make that money back and then more so once you sell all these tickets.
Oh yeah,
to an event.
We did that once.
Yeah, event 5 people are going to go to, Or my other favorite thing is like jury fees. Like, I'm sorry, I don't care about what your opinion is of my art.
Jury fees? What is this?
Yeah, jury fees is like, okay, let's say you're submitting your art to a gallery, and they're like, okay, $25 jury fee, $25 hanging fee, $25 this, postcard fee, and you're like, do you realize, like, I am a broke-ass artist? Like, I have no money, but you want more money from me for this thing? It's like, no.
And there's so many. And one thing I see, I don't know if it's in the visual arts world, but in the band world, it drives me insane. There are a million people who want to sell you a million programs online so you can learn how how to do
Oh, yeah.
X, Y, Z. Now, I'm all about learning. We paid for some of that as a band, but we had to thoroughly research and found about 95% of them are all full of shit. And
Yeah.
there are people who couldn't make it as an artist or a manager or whatever it was. And it wasn't until we found the people who were like, oh, no, they really did the thing. And now they're showing us how to do the thing. It's so hard. That frustrates me so much. I don't know if that's in the visual arts world
Oh,
as
yeah.
well.
Oh, yeah. No, I get a lot. Remember in, I think it was like a Rolling Stone magazine, they had the little blurb where it's like, hey, get your poem published in our magazine. Only like $25
I've never
or
seen
whatever.
stuff like that, yeah.
And it's like, hey, we're doing this art book and we want your art in there. Just pay this fee and your art's in this like kind of thing. And it's like, I remember like a while back, Charles Band, he makes all these like really crappy horror movies like Puppet Master. They're like bad but fun, kind of thing.
Right.
Evil Bong, Ginger Dead Man and stuff like that. And he was doing the thing where he's like charging people basically product placement fees to be in his movie. So it's like, hey, if you make this for $500, we'll put it in this movie. Right. And I remember talking to Bill at Hyena about it. It's like, this is so weird because I got paid to be in a movie, yet he's trying to charge me to be in a movie. And Bill's like, yeah. And he's like, the worst thing about it is like, if you're in that movie, everyone knows you paid to be there, know? And it's just like, it's kind of like,
I can just see through it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And there's so many, there's Sonic Bids. I actually talked to a promoter once that they do these things like pay $25 to submit to some festival. Yeah. And they basically used it as a way to fund their festival and literally use not a single band that submitted.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, are you fucking kidding me? Like, what? And that's when I'm like, I can't do that stuff anymore. So
yeah, my friends and I have the like no pay to play kind of rule that, if they cut like, because a lot of them will be like really sneaky about it, It's like Craigslist used to be like full of like art calls and everything. And it's just like, oh yeah, and blah 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 blah. Then you hear stories like I had a friend who worked in the city, and at the art gallery, he would go to like Italy. He would go all these different places, get all this art, and he's like, oh yeah, I'll sell it in America for you. And they would call and they're like, how's my art doing? He's like, oh, not good. It's still here. And he had sold all of it.
My God.
So it's just, I mean, that's where it's like,
it's our dream and our passion, and we put our heart into it. You were talking about that, where you're putting all of yourself into this creation. And then you couple that with the majority of us are broke, especially in the beginning. And so we become desperate, and artists can become easy prey. And it's sad. It's sad when it happens. That's for sure.
Yeah, I always see it as like punching down, it's just like, it's kind of like you're like, I mean, artists, musicians, writer, anyone in the creative industry, like people love it. Right. But then they're like, at the same time, there's like not a whole lot of respect in it. If that makes sort of like kind of sense, where it's like, where it's just like, yeah, no matter like how many, like what you've gone through to be at the space that you are now, and all the trials and error, trials by fire, all that kind of stuff. And that, it is one of those things where it's like, unless you do a jingle for like Dr. Pepper, they're like, it's like, yeah.
I guess it's all right. Well, one thing that seems to be important to you, just in conversation that I'm hearing, is a community of people. Where you talked about, you called up your community to help you with this week turnaround for this big moment. As I was looking up on some of the things online, it seems like you're also involved with trying to help support and invest in other people. What does that look like for you, and where does that come from for you?
Well, I think one of the weird things is like competition in the art world. I don't get it, because it's like we're all fighting. We're all like, it's like, I don't want to compare it to Nam, but it's like one of those war movies where we're all in this together. So why are we like, but it's also like one of those things where, there are certain people out there, you've probably met them, that are sharks that are just like, they'll do whatever they can for success. They'll do stepping stones. They'll be your friend one day. You teach them everything that you know, and then they just like shit can you. Right?
Juices.
Yeah, totally. but it's also like, and that's also one of the things that kind of keeps me afloat too, because it's like, all right, let's say you're a shark, right? And you work all the way up and you have the success and everything, and you're in juxtapose and you're in high fructose and you're in all those things and everything like that, right? Then you're like kind of like a one-hit wonder. And then people are like, oh yeah, there's that person. And then they disappear, right? Yeah. When you build a community of collectors and artists and you have that kind of like, you know, everyone has each other's back, everyone supports each other and everything like that. Well, when the hard times comes, you have like kind of like a safety net to fall on, you know, because it's like, it is one of those things where art sales are never consistent. Like some months I'm rich, some months I'm poor. Like there's no science to it, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's like the biggest problem people have with art is they think there's like a path or a science to it, when it's like, no, there's many paths and there's absolutely no science to it. Like when I did a lecture, I said after like umpteen years like selling art, there's only one thing I learned, and that's if you make a cat painting, it will sell like crack. Because everyone loves cat paintings, and they'll go up to them and they're like, oh, that's my cat. My cat does that. And it doesn't matter how good or bad it is.
Your cat.
Cat paintings are like, I was like, if you need to make rent fast, cats. Because it's like, there are certain like subject matters. And this is like, I mean, as you're an artist, you're product testing at the same time. You're like, okay, this sells, this doesn't sell, this is like, you know, kind of thing. And at the same time, you're trying to express yourself, but you also have to make money. So then, like in the lecture, I was like, if you need rent money quick, make a fuck ton of cats. Just cat. And I'm like, you'll be set. Because it's like, and it's funny because like I'll make art. And my friends will see like, oh, you're making a bunch of cats, huh? Slow month, huh, buddy? I'm like, yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, for us, it's the cover. It's the cover songs where so many original bands, original artists don't want to do covers. They feel like a sellout. And then we got caught in that. And then all of a sudden we're like, oh shit, we can actually make money. So we're going to do some cover gigs on this tour. All right. Everyone suck it up and just do it. You know,
it's funny. I found like one of these old, like how to make it in heavy metal video cassettes. And I was watching it and they said that too. They're just like, well, you can have your own stuff, but do a bunch of cover songs, and that like brings in that audience, you know. It's kind of like as an artist too, it's like when I do like a comic book convention or like any kind of convention, I'll throw the Star Wars in there, I'll throw the superhero stuff in there, I'll throw all that stuff mixed with my own stuff. And it's like it seems like selling out, but it's like what you are like, but it's kind of like what you're doing is you're still creating. You're just creating in different forms, you know. Like I always see it as just like being a creative person is like almost having like multiple personalities, because you have to jump like all over the place in a variety of different styles. Like when I was trying out for Clock Tower, I pretended to be 7 different artists, and I did 7 different styles. And that was another thing that like kind of kept me in the running too. Is like I was like, all right, here's this, because I'm so fast, and people are like. It's funny. People are like, wow, how'd you get so fast? I'm like, fear, desperation, and poverty.
Fear, desperation, and poverty.
Yeah, I would get a call, and it's like, hey, this like artist flaked out. Could you fill a gallery? And I'm like, yeah, when do you need it? Tomorrow? All-nighter, you know, get the Red Bulls and like stay up all night and just like working on it and stuff like that. I mean, you know, luckily, like, it's funny. It took me a long time to get out of that. Like, I think I only got out of it like this year. It's like umpteen years selling art. Where I allowed myself to take time, you know, because there's always a big thing for me is like, okay, gotta get done, gotta get out, gotta, you know, all this stuff and everything. And then at the same time, gotta make it personal. And then the other part of an artist, 90% of it is covering fuck ups. So it's like going over it, fine detailing, covering fuck ups, sending it out. It's like, okay, I fucked up there. Here's a little hat, you know, there you go, you know, out into the world. And then the other thing that happens to you is like, once it's out in the world, it's no longer yours. Because I've had people go up to me and they're like, that creature used to attack me in my dreams when I was like 9 years old. I'm like, that's funny because I beat it last week, you know? And my buddy Cinder has this great story where we adopted Thomas Kincaid as our arch nemesis, just because he was just such an ass. And my buddy Cinder made this like one of his lighthouses in this UFO, just blowing it up, right? And he had all this like story behind it, all this meaning and everything. The guy is like, I like UFOs. I like UFOs. Just totally didn't care about any of the other stuff too, you know. And then we do like a pranks at the gallery where we just find a chair and it's like, man alone in chair, and people would go up to it and they're like, oh, you know, it's a great way to punk people. It's just like put a sign on something and they're like, oh, okay, like, and then look around and it's like, I need to find deep meaning in this, you know. Yeah.
They're trying really hard. Like, let me dive in.
Totally. Yeah. My friend Temple, she put paint on her boobs and she squished them on this glass window frame. And this person's like, oh, that's all about recycling. Yeah, we need to give back. And she's like, I just did it for fucks, you know, like, like I just did it for fun, but you know, and the guy bought it, you know, so it's like, that's the other thing too. Is just
it hit him deeply, and she was like, "I just put my boobs on a
but I mean
on a glass plate. That's it."
But it's kind of like once you let go of ownership of your own art, you know, that's the hard thing to do. Because like I've had people like send me paint swatches to match their furniture. I've had like, you know, like whatever kind of thing, and it's like, you know, it always sounds like you're selling out, but if you're not making money,
you can't keep creating.
You can keep creating. You know, just like you just need like a storage shed. You know what I mean? It's like,
right,
and stuff like that. And I think the other thing too is like when I grew up, I was like a punk rocker. Like I wanted to be something from another planet. You know, and so like when I started going professionally, it was really funny. It was like all I had to go by was the Great Rock and Roll Swindle and what bands did. So I went up and down Haight Street, putting up flyers for my website, my MySpace, my art, and everything like that. And you know, because it's like you don't know what you're doing, and there's no one to teach you, you know. And so, but it worked out. I think that's the thing that like freaked me out the most was like that it worked out. Because, you know,
like somehow it all came together.
Yeah, like I mean, you as a musician, you know, it's like I mean, like once you get past the like proving them wrong, you know, it's like, oh, you'll never make it, you'll never do it, and once you're past that, then you're like, okay, well, what's on my bucket list to do? And then you go to the bucket list, and you're like, after that, and you know, and then you just get hit with these weird projects left and right. Like I designed puppets for a TV show. Like, this guy paid me a large sum of money to do all the football logos as penises and stuff like that. And it's just like all this random weird stuff. And then the flip side of that is like, you get the reputation of like getting all the weird jobs. So it's like, you know, I have all these weird jobs. And then at the same time, I have like Caleb's book where it's like my heart goes out in it. Like when Caleb was like, hey, here's a book I read. I was like, man, I would do this for free. Like if I could.
That's amazing.
Because
and he had mentioned that you seem very passionate about that project, and you work more, you know, like in all these different arenas. But here you are illustrating a children's book that's dealing with some heavy stuff. And And it was kind of like one of those things of like, how do you translate something like very heavy into something that isn't going to scare kids? You know, and then that's where it's like the kind of cartoon style is disarming, and it makes it more palatable or like more accepting, you know, in a way for kids to understand. Because I mean, like kids learn, they're smart, and it was a book that needed to be out there. Like I remember, like Caleb and I were talking in the very beginning before I had a publisher. I was just like, man, if you just bring these to like a church, if you just bring these to like, you know, a bookstore, if you just give them away, you know, it's going to make such a huge difference, you know. And now he's published, and now it's like, it's really kind of cool. So like, yeah, on the one hand,
I'll make really gory, weird creatures. On the other hand, I'll do something like really wholesome and like, full of heart and empathy, like this book. I did one for his friend Stacy, one about being an artist, one about depression, kids with depression,
awesome.
one's about kids and atheists and everything. And so, I mean, that's the other thing too, where it's like you flip all over the place. Where it's like, okay, here's something very religious, here's something very atheist, here's something very flying spaghetti monster. It's like
hit all the areas.
But I mean, what I tell everybody, I mean that's the other thing with Caleb, is just like making art accessible. That's just what needs to happen, because when we were talking about price and everything, I was going through everything, and I was just like, look, I really want to make this book. I want to make it happen and everything. And, I know it's kind of like a big weight, and like, so it's flexible, and then it was just like, I think I did it in 2 days, and then send it back to him. And then
being super fast.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing too is like, after you've done like 3,000 paintings, drawings, and everything, you better get good at it.
If not, then maybe it's time to go back to sales somewhere else.
Yeah, well, I always tell artists, it's like, hey, if you want to get rich, flip houses. Like, forget art, But the other thing too is like, I think what I like about art, and I don't know if this is true with you, but the challenge of it. You know what I mean? It's kind of like when I was in school and they had occupations, it was like ditch digger, like fry cook, whatever kind of thing, And everyone said, it's like, oh, you can't make it as art, being an artist, being a musician. You just can't. And then when you go and do, it just reminds me of like Sammy Davis Jr. Like, strangely, because there was this interview with Sammy Davis Jr. Like, why do you do all these things, like these goofy things and everything, and like with all these skits, and they're kind of like racial or whatever? And he's like, well, I want to make it easier for the next person. And that's kind of like me as an artist, like with him, he's talking specifically to the African American people, but for me as like artists, I want to make it easier for that artist behind me. That's and just awesome go like, hey, you can do it. It's gonna suck a lot. Like the pain, the humiliation, and the stress are going to outweigh the fun perks and everything, but right. It's going to be worth it because you did it, and it's just like,
I had a professor in college who actually told me something very similar when I told him what I want to do. I was like, I want to write, record, and tour pretty much my whole life. That's what I want to do at 18 when I was first talking to him, and still working on to this day. And he told me that. He goes, you're just going to have to accept that you're going to have to put in 110% every single day, and accept the fact that it may not look like you want in the end, but the joy was the fact that you did it and you took that journey. That's going to have to be what you live in and accept. And I've never forgot that conversation. It's really lived out, because I've tried other things. I've tried to give up on it multiple times throughout my life. I started a roofing company. Like I said, like if you want to make money, go do something else. Like, and so like a friend was like, what are you doing? I was like, I'm making money. So I started a roofing company. It was making money. I hated it. Went and try to do other things, and ultimately always came back to the creation, because it was like the shittiest day creating is better than my best day doing really anything else.
Yeah. I mean, I like not knowing what's coming down the pipe. I think that's one of my favorite parts about the job, is like, you never know what's coming up. Like, I just did a series of 13 illustrations of photographers for a photo studio that's opening up from my friend Anita in Oakland. And then after that, we're still working on Batshit, and we're doing like more visuals for the animated intro for that. And then I'm also producing a TV show, Mosquito and Spider, that's in like 3 years. Our editors were like kind of like Spinal Tap, the drummers. We just kept losing editors, so we had like this stockpile of like 3 years worth of footage, and it's like we all produced it ourselves and everything, and probably getting edited down to the final. Like the first season is getting closer and closer to being like put together. And that was just started because like I went to the Alternative Press Expo in San Francisco, And it was like all these creative people out of work. You know, it's like you had out of work animators, you had out of work artists, you had out of work whatever kind of thing. And they're just, you know, they're foot pedaling it like me. And so I was like, well, what if I got like a TV show and brought everybody into the TV show, make it sort of like Space Ghost format based off of my webcomic characters. And initially we thought it was going to just be like a box or something, you know, like, and then 2 puppets. And then it just grew. Now it has a professional set, professional actors. We have bins and bins and bins of thousands of puppets. And yeah, now it's like seeing the light of day. So it's like, it's just nice to put that payoff. But at the same time, sometimes you forget that you're involved in so many things that I often feel like the thing where like, I'm getting nothing done. But it's like, oh, you have a movie over here. You have a TV show over here. You have this project over here. You have this project. This is coming to light. This is coming to light. So it's like, I don't know. I think you just get so focused on what's coming in that you forget what you have accomplished, you know?
Yeah. Sometimes you have to stop and look back a little bit. Be like, oh, yeah, I kind of did do that. That's good.
Yeah, and it's like, it's one of those things, like I look at my resume and it's just like I was watching this documentary called Heckler. I totally recommend it.
With Jamie Kennedy?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've seen that.
Because as an artist, I kind of feel like one of the great things about that is just like have your retorts lined up. You know, sort of like when people are like, oh, so what do you do for a living? Oh, I sell art to Charlie Sheen. Oh, okay. You know, like that kind of thing to get past those
said it right there.
Prejudices and biases and like, you know, people just like the armchair critics going like, oh, blah, 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 you know. Like, I mean, it's crazy because musicians and artists, it's kind of like if you're like a prostitute or a drug dealer, no one would question your finances. No one's going to be like, hey, did you make any money today? Okay, good.
Well, you're probably doing good.
Yeah, exactly. But your artist, musician, writer, they're like, so is there an empty, guitar case out there with some coins in it for you?
Like, would you like me to PayPal you some money? Are you going to need help? Kind of thing.
Totally. How are you doing? Those check-ins and stuff like that. I mean, yeah.
Well, man, I love your perspective of entrepreneurship within the art world. Like it's inspiring to me to hear, and I love your focus of community. Even hearing about how you built this project, like, hey, here's these struggling people. I want to leave something better behind me, so let's bring everybody in. I dig it. But kind of landing the plane in here, the 2 big things that I like to dive into towards the end. This idea of living a great life, creating great things. I'm on my own like personal journey to kind of figure out what the hell that looks like for me. But it's been inspiring to hear other people's thoughts. So starting with that first question for you, if you had to boil it down, even maybe put it on a meme or paint it on a canvas, what does living a great life look like to you?
Oh man, getting to do what I want for a living. Seriously. Like, you don't know how rare that is. Like, I mean, it's like, and mostly because people are afraid, you know, people are like terrified. And because we have this whole culture that's taught them that you can never be successful. You can never be successful at anything. You know, it's like kind of like to push you down kind of thing, to make you smile and enjoy Bagel Wednesday at your corporate job or whatever kind of thing. You know, I mean, it's kind of like one of those things, like even when I wasn't making money on art, I was making art. And that to me is the best life, is I get to do what I want for a living. I work with all my friends, you know, it's like and the people who hire me become friends, like Caleb, and he and I bonded over Microwave Massacre, the really crappy horror movie. But
I've not heard of that one.
Yeah, but I mean, it's like I think, like, I remember, like, I was doing this one show in Artery Gallery in Benicia, and he said, it's like, you know, people forget that, like, being an artist, you have to have social skills, you know, and it doesn't seem like this big thing, but, like, I remember back in the day, I was a shy church mouse. Like, I was so quiet, you know, in my teen years, and I had this friend Desmond who was like, he talked like a game show host. But he got all these chicks and everything, and I was like, wow, he's cool.
Like, hey.
I'm going to start talking like a game show host so I could get all these chicks too. So I started talking like a game show host, got me out of my shyness. But then I had to retrain myself to learn how to talk like myself and not him or a game show host. So something like a little more like authentic or whatever. But because of that thing, it's like, I mean, it's kind of like you network with everybody. You know, it's like I've had, like I used to have the thing where you send these letters to like people fighting the war and everything. You send them like candy from the dollar store and everything like that. Well, it's like one of the guys from there contacted me 6 years later to develop to design a hot sauce label, right? And then another person bought my art. He commissioned me to do Uncle Sam, Cthulhu, and the Kraken, and he mounted that on his tank in Afghanistan. So,
Damn.
yeah, so I mean, it's kind of like the stories. Like you're never without great stories when you're, you know, when you're talking to people, and I think that's the biggest thing. Like I think 90% of my success is based off of like Danny Trejo said this thing. It's like every success I've ever had was stemmed from doing something good for somebody else, and that's I think the best way to kind of network and connect with people, because like I've done a lot of like free drawing, I've done a lot of like free work and everything, and other stuff just because like I like this or that or the other, and then from that stemmed to like all these different things, and you know, people using art for podcasts and everything like that. I ended up like I'm one of the artists for Print Called Nation and Fun Lizards of America, the Snowplow Show, like all these print colors, and like I draw people getting angry and stuff like that. You know, and it's just, you know, it's kind of like it's one of those things where you have to like, it goes back to yourself, and you're like, wow, like I'm doing this job and I'm happy in this job, and this job isn't like a job, you know. It's like,
right.
And you
like
look
where you're
back at all the
grateful at
different
this
things.
point just to be able to get paid to do it in a sense.
And
At least for me.
And underneath that, it's world domination. Because let me explain. Like making your art accessible, right? Selling to 1 million different people. Having your art in every house next to the TV is like, I might never be in a museum. I may never have like, you know, introspective or like something like that. But I've conquered the world. Like when one of my pieces ended up in a thrift shop, I was like, I made it. That to me is success. Like when your stuff is so much out there that it ends up in a thrift store. You know,
people are just like, you know, I got to get rid of some things, and you're like, what? That's awesome, man. That's awesome.
I mean, I think it's like changing the idea of art, and like when you change the idea of art and you make it obtainable and accessible and everything, like it's one of those things where like I don't know, it just tells a story. It keeps going and going and going. Like I've had art, like my art given away to other people from other people, and just keeps spreading around like a virus. And it's just like, it's a lot, like that's what I'm going to leave behind. And that to me is success, because it's like, yeah, you know, it's like, I'm not an Oprah or whatever, but I don't care about that. But I am in everybody's house, you know, and like,
well, and really you found a way to do what you love, to do actually what you want and execute that way. And you kind of hit on it, I think, a little bit, but if you had to distill it again in a meme or something shareable in that regard, what does creating great things mean to you?
Probably Frankenstein.
You're gonna have to unpack that one for me.
Okay, so when I first learned to draw, right? Like I didn't know how to draw, so I tried to trace the TV as the images were going across the TV, and then I used to watch this show Creature Features, and when I saw Frankenstein, right here, he built a creation out of all these variety of sources. He put together and gave it life. And I feel like that's kind of art. It's like, all right, like I'm a big fan of B movies and monster movies. I'm a big fan of Ren and Stimpy. I'm a big fan of all this stuff. It all goes into this big kind of creation. And then through your hands, you take all that information, all those body parts, and you put them together. It's like how you do hands, how you do eyes, how you do everything. And it becomes your creation. And then that creation becomes alive because when you're doing a show, everyone who looks upon it, it lives in their head. So that when they're walking around, it sort of plants this little seed in it. And then it becomes theirs and no longer yours, you know? And so, yeah, like, I mean, I think that's behind my art, like, very much in the beginning. It's like, I wanted to make monsters. I want to make my own monsters. I want to be Dr. Frankenstein. I just want to, like, put all these things together, you know, like those old, like, drawing kits where it's like you have these different slides and you rub across the slides and it's like one's a head, torso, legs.
Right.
I still do that now. I mean, that's where it's just like, I'm like, okay, like, how can I make this weird? How can I make this weirder? How can I make this like really weird? You know?
I love it. That's the freshest answer I've had thus far throughout the podcast for what does it mean to create great things in Frankenstein. But I love it, especially as an artist and perspective and influences coming in. That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
One thing on before unfortunately I do have to take off, but I wanted to ask you, so really bad horror movies. I've rarely found anyone who ever thought this was a great movie, but I love the shit out of it. Rubber.
Oh, own it. You should
I love that movie. It's a killer fucking tire. What in the world?
If you check out Wrong Cops, it's also by Quentin Dupieux.
Same director.
I'm totally butchering his last name, but same director. And it's about cops, and Marilyn Manson is like a male prostitute in it, and like it's all about keywords.
It's so like, insane.
It's kind of like imagine the director of Rubber making his own Pulp Fiction. That's what Wrong Cops is. Also, I recommend Blood Car. Spaghetti Man.
Okay.
Spaghetti Man and what was one of the other ones I found that was really fun? I did finish Bigfoot versus the Illuminati. That was interesting.
Have you seen the Bigfoot film? It's not like B-ish movie, but there's a Bigfoot film that Bobcat Goldthwait put together. Oh, yeah. I can't remember the name of it, but I didn't know it was him until the end, and I was like, that was a really good movie. And then I realized he was the one who I think either directed or wrote it. I can't remember.
Yeah, I think it's like Willow Creek.
Yeah, that sounds right. Right.
Art poster by artist Alex Pardee. Bobcat Goldthwait is super super awesome. Like, I love his movies. I have Shakes the Clown. God Bless America was fantastic. Shakes the Clown. It has this great like rivalry between clowns and mimes.
I love it.
And Bobcat's an alcoholic, crazy, fucked up clown in it. How could you not love it?
Well, Nick, man, it was great hanging out with you. Unfortunately, I do have to take off, but thank you so much. I love the perspective that you're coming from. It inspires me a ton.
Yeah, definitely, man.
I would love...
Thank you for listening to the Live and Create podcast. If you like what you heard, make sure you subscribe and leave a comment or a review.
The Live and Create podcast.